Ars Libri is an everyman's journey, book by book, through Western literature. We read, retell, and reclaim our rich heritage. Be sure to subscribe to the show at arslibri.substack.com. Brambly Hedge, The High Hills. Is that what I'm supposed to read? The High Hills? Okay. It was the very end of autumn. The weather was damp and chilly, and Wilfred was spending the day inside with the weavers. Clickety-clack went the loom. Whir, whir went the spinning wheel. Lily and Flax were in a hurry. "We must finish in time," said Flax. "We promised Mr. Apple." "What are you making?" asked Wilfred. "Blankets," replied Lily. "Who are they for?" asked Wilfred. "They were for the voles in the high hills," replied Flax. "They've just discovered that the moths have eaten all their quilts, and they've no time to make new ones before the cold weather comes. They're too busy gathering stores for winter. We're helping out." "Can I help too?" asked Wilfred. "That's kind of you, Wilfred, but not just now," said Lily. "Why don't you find yourself a book to read while I finish spinning this wool?" Wilfred went over to the bookcase. On a shelf tucked between volumes of dye stuffs and weaves, he found a thick book called Daring Explorers of Old Hedge Days. He seated himself comfortably and began to turn the pages. "Sir Hogweed Horehound," he read, "determined to conquer the highest peak on the high hills, for there he knew he would discover gold. Alone he set forth, taking in his trusty pack all he needed to survive the rigorous journey." Wilfred sat entranced. The whir of the spinning wheel became the swish of eagle's wings, the clatter of the loom, the sound of falling rock, the drops of rain on the window, jewels from the depths of some forgotten cave. Was there really gold in the hills beyond Brambly Hedge, he wondered. Suddenly a door slammed. It was his mother come to fetch him home for tea. "I hope he hasn't been too much trouble," said Mrs. Toadflax. "He's been so quiet, we'd almost forgotten he was here," said Lily. "You can send him down again tomorrow if you like." There's a picture of Wilfred sitting on a stool reading a book, and his face is right in the book.
It is. Mm-hmm.
Lily and Flax were already hard at work when Wilfred arrived the next morning. He settled down by the window again to read about Sir Hogweed Horehound and his intrepid search for gold. The morning flew past, and by the time Mr. Apple arrived to collect Wilfred, Flax and Lily had almost finished the cloth. "I'm sorry we couldn't match the yellow," said Flax. "We've used the last of Grandpa Blackthorn's lichen, and no other dye will do." "Never mind," said Mr. Apple. "It's the blankets they need. We'll take them up to the hills tomorrow." "The hills," repeated Wilfred. "Are you really going up to the high hills?" "Yes," replied Mr. Apple. "Why?" "Can I come?" Wilfred asked desperately. "Please say I can." "Oh, I don't think so," said Mr. Apple. "It's too far, and we shall have to stay overnight." "I'll be very good," urged Wilfred. Mr. Apple relented. "We'll see if your mother agrees," he said. "Come on, young mouse. It's time to go home." To Wilfred's surprise, his mother did agree. "It will do him good to be in the open air," she said. Wilfred rushed upstairs to pack. He knew just what he would need. Sir Hog... he knew because of what Sir Hogweed took. He's reliving the book. Sir Hogweed Horehound had listed all the essential gear in his book: rope, a whistle, food, fire stick, cooking pots, a ground sheet and blankets, a spoon, a water bottle, and a first aid kit. It's like when Mr. Beaver packs Mrs. Beaver the sewing machine, a cast iron pot, and a spare one,
And the bread knife.
the bread knife, butter, extra needles in case anything rips. I better have a sewing machine, yeah. Some slippers, a nightcap, a rocking chair, toothbrush.
Toothpaste.
Don't forget the toothpaste. "And I'd better have a special bag for the gold," said Wilfred to himself. Wilfred's going to get that gold. He went to bed straight after supper. It's a long way to the high hills, and to get to the vole's hole by dusk, they would have to make an early start. Next morning, after dawn, Flax, Lily, and Mr. Apple called for Wilfred. They were carrying packs on their back full of cloth and blankets, and there was honey, cheese, and a pudding for the voles from Mrs. Apple. Wilfred hurried down the stairs. "Whatever have you got there?" asked Flax. "It's my essential gear," explained Wilfred. "You won't be needing a crock pot. I've got some sandwiches," said Mr. Apple. "But I must take everything," said Wilfred. His lips began to quiver. "How can I find gold without my equipment?" "You'll have to carry it then," said Mr. Apple. "We can't manage any more." The first part of the journey was easy. The four mice went up the hedge, past Crabapple Cottage, the store stump, and Old Oak Palace. Then they arrived at the weavers' cottages and arrived at the bank of the stream. Carefully they picked their way over the stepping stones and clambered up into the buttercup meadow. Wilfred strode through the grass, occasionally lifting his paw to gaze at the distant peaks. Beyond the bluebell woods he could see the path begin to climb. Here the picture shows that they're in the Brambly Hedge, but beyond are these distant hills, and the mice are all packing their items, walking through it. You see? Mr. Apple looked back. "How's my young explorer?" he said. "Ready for lunch?" "Oh, please," said Wilfred, easing off his pack with relief. The mice ate their picnic and enjoyed the late autumn sunshine, but soon it was time to go on. All through the afternoon they walked. The path became steeper and steeper, and when they looked behind them, they could see the fields and woods and hedges spread out far below. That's one of the great things about hiking, going up a mountain, is you spend time walking up, just following a path. But every once in a while, you look back behind you and see the progress you've made and the vast view behind you, which you don't notice until you stop and look back. It's kind of like life. Every once in a while, stop and look back, see how far you've come. By tea time, it was getting dark and cold, and the hills around were shrouded in mist. At last, they saw a tiny light shining from a rock beneath an old hawthorn tree. "Here we are," said Mr. Apple. "Knock on the door, Wilfred, will you?" An elderly vole opened it a crack. When she saw Mr. Apple, she cried, "Pip, fancy you coming all this way, and with your bad leg, too." "We couldn't leave you without blankets, now could we?" said Mr. Apple. The mice crowded into the cottage and were soon sitting around the fire, drinking hot bilberry soup and resting their weary paws. For Wilfred, the conversation came and went in drifts, and soon he was fast asleep. Someone lifted him gently onto the little bracken bed in a corner, and the next thing he knew was the delicious smell of breakfast sizzling on the range. Wilfred ate heartily, oatcakes with rowanberry jelly, and listened to the voles describing their hard life in the hills. He was disappointed when Mr. Apple announced that it was time to leave. "Can't we explore a bit first?" he begged. "Flax and I have to get back to work," said Lily. "But why don't you two follow on later?" "Well," relented Mr. Apple, "there are some fine junipers beyond the crag." "And Mrs. Apple loves junipers," said Wilfred quickly. "Let's get her some." So the mice said goodbye to the voles, and Mr. Apple and Wilfred set off up the path. Wilfred ran on ahead and was soon around the crag. When Mr. Apple caught up with him, Wilfred was halfway up a steep face of rock. "Wilfred!" cried Mr. Apple. "Come down!" "Just a minute!" shouted Wilfred. "I found something!" Mr. Apple watched as Wilfred pulled himself up onto the narrow ledge and started scraping at the rock and stuffing something in his pocket. "Look!" cried Wilfred. "Gold!" "Don't be silly, Wilfred!" shouted Mr. Apple. "That's not gold. Come down at once!" Wilfred looked over the side. His voice faltered. "I can't. I'm scared," he said. Mr. Apple was exasperated. "Wait there!" he shouted. Slowly he climbed the steep rocks, carefully placing his paws in the clefts of the stones. The ledge was very narrow. "We'll edge along this way. Perhaps the two paths will meet," he said. "Certainly we can't go down the way we came up." As they walked cautiously along the ledge, an ominous mist began to rise from the valley. "If only we had some rope," said Mr. Apple. "We ought to rope ourselves together." Wilfred put his paw in his pack and produced the rope. Mr. Apple tied it carefully around Wilfred's middle and then round his own. And it was just as well, for a few minutes later they were engulfed in a thick white fog. Turn to the rock face, Wilfred. We'll ease our way along one step at a time. They went on for some time, then took a rest. As they sat on the wet rock, the mist parted for a few seconds, just long enough to show a steep, deep, strange valley. Mr. Apple was worried. He had no idea where they were. It looked as though they would have to spend the night on the mountain. It would be very cold and dark, and all he had in his pocket were 2 sandwiches that the voles had given him for the journey down. His leg was feeling stiff and sore, too. What was to be done? He explained the situation to Wilfred. It's all my fault, said Wilfred. I didn't mean us to get lost. I just wanted to find gold like Sir Hogweed. Never mind, said Mr. Apple. We must look for somewhere to spend the night. A short way along the path, the ledge became a little wider. Under an overhang of rock, a small cave ran back into the mountainside. Look, cried Wilfred, slinging his pack inside. Base camp! Mr. Apple sat gingerly on the damp moss at the mouth of the cave. Everything felt damp. His clothes, his whiskers, his handkerchief. I wish I had brought my pipe. We could have made a fire, he said. Never mind. We'll huddle close and try to keep warm. But Wilfred was busily searching in his pack again. Out came the fire sticks and the tinder box. I'll see if there's some dry wood at the back of the cave, he said enthusiastically. Wilfred, cried Mr. Apple in admiration, you are a real explorer. Well, it's convenient that he has all these things in his pack, but Wilfred also got them into this situation to begin with, to make them need it. I know some people like that. They'll go out and do things that get them in trouble, but they've prepared for all the trouble that they got into. And then they're excited that they get to use the stuff that they bought, that they have. The picture shows the 2 mice at the back of some ledge. Not really a cave so much as a ledge. And they're covered up in blankets. There's a fire burning with a pot. So they did bring a pot. And smoke is rising. And you can see the distant stars and mountains. Soon they had a cheerful blaze on the ledge outside the cave. Wilfred produced 2 blankets, and the mice wrapped themselves snugly while their clothes dried in front of the fire. The little kettle was filled from the water bottle, and proudly Wilfred set out a feast of bread and cheese and honey cakes. You know, said Mr. Apple as he settled back against the rock, I haven't enjoyed a meal so much for years. To while away the time, Mr. Apple began to tell Wilfred stories of his adventurous youth, and as they talked, the mists gradually cleared and a starry sky spread out above them. All was quiet but for the murmur of a stream which ran through the valley below like a silver ribbon in the moonlight. Warmed by the fire, they became drowsy and soon fell asleep. The next morning they were awoken by the sun shining into the cave. It's a beautiful day, cried Wilfred, peering over the ledge, and I can see a path down the mountain. Mr. Apple sat up and stretched his legs. One of them still hurt. We'll have to go down slowly, I'm afraid, he said. Is it your legs? Said Wilfred. I can help, and brought out a jar of comfrey ointment from his first aid kit. He brought a jar of ointment from his first aid kit just for old man's legs. What did he label it? What do you label it on the side? Old man leg. That's the ointment. Comfrey is what they call it. They packed up and set off down the path. Mr. Apple did the best he could, but his leg was still very painful. He managed to get as far as the stream, but then he had to stop. He sat on a boulder with a sigh. I can't go any farther, he said. What are we to do? The 2 mice sat in silence and watched the water swirl past the bank. Don't worry, said Wilfred, trying to be cheerful. We'll think of something. Suddenly he jumped up. I've got it, he cried excitedly. We'll sail down the stream. He ran to the bank and with his ice axe, he hooked out some large sticks that had been caught behind a rock in the water. Using his rope to lash them together, he made a raft. Come on, he said. We'll shoot the rapids. He's living every boy's dream, to walk out into the wild and get into a situation where you got to survive and struggle and find gold and make rafts and heal old man's legs. Are you sure this is a good idea? Said Mr. Apple. Wherever will we end up? Don't worry, said Wilfred. It's all going to be all right. That's what young people always think. It'll work out. Don't worry. Woohoo! Yee! Carefully, they climbed onto the raft. Mr. Apple let go of the bank, and they were off. They were swept into the middle of the stream as it raced down the mountainside, twisting and turning, sweeping, splashing, careering, or careening as it should be, over rocks, cutting through deep banks. My hat! Shouted Wilfred. I lost my hat. Never mind that, cried Mr. Apple. Just hold on tight. There's a boulder ahead. Wilfred gripped the sides of the raft, and somehow they managed to keep the raft and themselves afloat. Do you see the picture with his hat? His little hat?
Oh, yeah.
Down by the stream, Dusty was ferrying the search party of mice over the buttercup meadows when he suddenly caught sight of a small red hat floating along on the current. Just a hat. Look there, he shouted. All the mice peered over the side of the boat. It's Wilfred's hat, cried Mrs. Toadflax. Whatever can have happened to him? Can he swim? Asked Mrs. Apple anxiously. Meanwhile, Wilfred and Mr. Apple were beginning to enjoy their trip on the river. The ground had leveled out, and the pace of the stream had become gentler. They looked out about them with interest. Wilfred, called Mr. Apple, can you see what I can see? I'm sure that's our willow ahead. Wilfred stared at the bank. It is, he yelled. And there's the old oak palace and the hornbeam. This is our stream. As they rounded the bend, they saw the Brambly Hedge mice climbing out of Dusty's boat. At the very same moment, Mrs. Apple looked up and cried, Look, there they are! The mice turned in amazement. The raft was almost abreast of them. Quick, shouted Dusty, catch hold of this rope. I'll haul you ashore. As the two mice clambered out of the raft and onto the bank, they all hugged each other. Wilfred, you're safe, cried Mrs. Toadflax. My dear, what has happened to your leg? Said Mrs. Apple. Lord Woodmouse took charge. Come on, everybody, he said. Let's get these travelers home and dry. Then we can hear the full story. The mice made their way along the hedgerow to the hornbeam tree. Soon everybody was sitting around the fire, eating cake and drinking acorn coffee. Now tell us exactly what happened, urged Flax. Well, it was my fault, explained Wilfred. I was looking for gold, and I got stuck. Mr. Apple had to rescue me, and then we got lost. And Mr. Apple's leg hurt so much we had to come back on the raft. Did you find any gold? Interrupted Primrose. No, only this silly old dust, said Wilfred, pulling the bag out of his pocket. Flax and Lily gasped. Wilfred, that's not dust. That's Grandpa Blackthorn's lichen. It's very rare. Wherever did you find it? Primrose ran to fetch some paper, and Wilfred proudly drew a map so they could find the place again. And when we go, you shall come with us, Wilfred, Lily promised. Mr. Apple was tired, and soon he and Mrs. Apple went home to Crabapple Cottage. One by one, the visitors drifted away. It was time for the explorer to go to bed. Wilfred followed his mother up the stairs. What adventures, she said, washing his face and paws, and helping him take off his muddy dungarees. Wilfred climbed into bed. As his mother tucked him in, he thought of his night beneath the stars, and snuggling down under his warm blanket, he was soon fast asleep. Brambly Hedge is a lovely children's book, or set of books. There are 8 stories total, written by Jill Barklam in 1980. It follows a self-sufficient, rustic, sophisticated colony of mice in the English countryside. Some people have called it cottagecore, which is, I'm not really sure what that's supposed to mean. Basically just...
You must not be on Pinterest.
Pinterest? Okay. Yeah, just cottagecore, basically everything to do with cottage village life. It's supposed to be set in the 17 and 1800s England. You really get the feel of that, and we'll talk about how that's achieved. There are 8 stories total. There are 4 that follow the seasons: summer, spring, winter, fall. Am I just going all kinds of different directions? It's more orderly than what I just said. And then there are 4 that are adventure stories: The Secret Staircase, The High Hills, Sea Story, and Poppy's Babies. I'm not sure how Poppy's Babies is an adventure story, but it is. It's part of the adventure series.
Adventure Light.
Adventure Light. Adventure Core.
No, it's light. The adventures in these stories are very young child. adventures.
Okay.
There's no pirates or big deals like that. It's small things like, yay, now we have a nursery for the babies. Surprise.
Yeah.
Or we took a trip down the river. Oh no, we hit the bank, but we're free now. Yay.
First, I want to talk about why the books have an appeal. And secondly, we'll talk about the stories themselves and then elements in the stories. I think that the appeal of these books is varied. One of them is you get a picture of what a simple life looks like. A simple life in a small society that's set before the Industrial Revolution, before plastic, before night lights all over town, before the roar of engines constantly in the background, before life was flooded with masses of people everywhere, traffic, red lights, lines, before daily life became an interaction constantly with the federal government or with mass society.
Yeah, everyone knows everyone else in this little neighborhood, village, community. They all have a part, they all have a role, but they know one another. And I think that's precious. They all live together this way.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And life is simple. You work with your hands. Problems are straightforward. People come together and solve them. And there's a sense of community and belonging.
Yes, even from other animals who aren't actually characters in the story. For instance, their milk. They run a dairy, and the
Mhm.
milk is donated by some friendly cows.
Yeah,
Or the salt that they use, they have to go and get. They have to sail down the river to the seashore, and they get their salt from
yeah,
other creatures there.
right.
As a mother reading these stories to my children, I love those sorts of details of the very practical food elements of like,
Yeah,
yeah, well, where did they get the cheese for
Right,
that? You know, it's
right.
like, oh, come on, mice. Well, she answers those questions. And I really love that actually.
This brings up another thing I think people like that they might not realize. There's a contrast between the imaginary world of a mice society with the realism of everything else. Even the drawings are logical and orderly and it makes sense and there are answers. Everything, like the weather, how they sail, how they get their salt, how they solve problems, how they mill flour or the wheat into flour. Everything has a logical, rational, realistic nature to it. So you might be attracted by the imaginary world of mice, but you get into it and it's very real.
Mm-hmm.
Chesterton talked about this and Tolkien talked about this with fairy stories. Everything in those stories is extremely real. People think that they're fake stories. There's a logic to them that is ironclad and irrevocable. Laws of nature, physics, and morality are unbreakable. However, there's talking mice. There's Lord Woodmouse and Lady Woodmouse. And there's Primrose and Poppy Eyebright and Dusty Dogwood and all these other mice.
And the names are all very sweet. They're all plants or
Yeah.
things similar to their occupation. There's Mrs. Apple or different things.
I guess my point here is that one thing that attracts people, one reason that the Brambly Hedge stories are a staple in children's literature, and you can read it again and again and not grow bored of them, is that there's this tension between the impossible and the real, the possible, between fairy and reality. I think that that is delightful when you wrap something real inside of something fantastic, a shell of something fantastic, but inside you get in and everything is very, very realistic and tangible.
Mm-hmm. Even when it comes to the adventure. So I
Mhm.
mentioned earlier it's adventure light, but that's because in real life, you're not encountering pirates and you're not encountering these fantastic adventures and beings. So in these stories also, even the problems they have to deal with are realistic ones.
Yes.
They ran out of something. They have to go get something. They have to solve a problem.
Mhm.
The boat drifts. They're all having a party and the boat drifts. And it's, little things
Yes.
that you can actually see happening in your life or someone's
Mhm.
life that you know. So even the problems are realistic.
Another reason I think this appeals to people, to me, to you, to the children, is that Brambly Hedge is an animal fable with exquisite detail. That's another way of trying to say what we're saying. Barklam apparently spent 5 years researching British history, British agriculture, British flora, traditional crafts before publishing this. So she didn't just write randomly about some mice. Haha, isn't this fun? You get into the story and you really feel like there is a realism about this, even though it's in a fantasy world.
Yeah, it's all very believable.
Yeah.
You can see that this could work.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, there really could be a colony of mice who live this way. Like,
Right.
this is legit.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And I think what we're saying takes a little imagination, perhaps. But again, go read Chesterton, his Ethics of Elfland, or go read Tolkien's On Fairy Stories, where they talk about how in fairy world is more real than the fiction that's turned out today. Because the fiction that's turned out today puts impossible people in an impossible world. It's all ridiculous. None of this is actually possible at all. Whereas this, if you grant the one fantasy of mice talking, the rest of it is entirely believable.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just think of the architecture of the book, for instance, the mice live in something called Stump Hall or the Old Oak Palace. And there are incredibly detailed cross-section drawings of homes and kitchens and pantries with stocked preserves. We'll talk about the aesthetic visual appeal also. But everything, the spiraling staircase going up the trunk of the tree, this must have taken a really, really long time. You can sit and actually look at the textured basket weave of a random basket in the corner of a very detailed drawing. The seasons are also something that are very present in the stories. There are 4 books actually called Spring Story, Summer Story, Autumn Story, Winter Story. And they show specific chores and duties and celebrations and festivals that come with the year. And the mice are subject to the elements. I mean, everything has a realism, but it's not heavy and dark like Watership Down. Watership Down, they're subject to realism too, but there's a sense of urgency and danger and suspicion where you don't get that here. Everything is nice and bright and happy.
Yeah, there's much more classic storybook adventure in Watership Down. Not so much here.
Mm-hmm. Another element of the realism is that they are very much Victorian style in their clothing, not high Victorian, kind of like country Victorian style in their clothing, in their mannerisms, in their etiquette. They even have a Lord and Lady Woodmouse, and they have Mr. and Mrs. Apple, and they have just random people. So there's this social order. They have picnics and balls. They have harvests of gathering things. There's celebrations that are very formal in the way that they do things, but it's a rustic formal. It's not palace court formal. It's sort of like a cozy utopia.
The word cozy was coming to my mind. It's such a cozy scenario, the whole thing.
So we'll explore some of these topics a little more. Let's talk about the stories of the books real quick. There are 8 stories total. The original ones were from the seasons, and then later on came 4 adventure stories. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. Spring is about Wilfred Toadflax. Wilfred Toadflax has a birthday picnic that goes awry in the spring story. The summer one is there's a beautiful river wedding between Poppy Eyebright and Dusty Dogwood. I've read that one so many times. I don't know why I've read that one. So I know that one.
We had that individual book.
Oh, do we?
Longer than we had the rest of them. So yes, that one we know really well.
It's funny. Dusty Dogwood, he is at the mill store or something. He's at a store. He works at a store?
He owns a flour mill.
A flour mill, okay. And basically he's dusty because of the flour. The story presents him as hardworking, quiet, and honest. He's fair. And then there's Poppy Eyebright, who is sometimes seen walking by his mill, or vice versa. He walks by her wherever she lives. And then eventually the two are found out to be engaged. That's how softly and gently they put it.
Mm-hmm.
He's an honorable man, and she's both of them are quiet people, and they're hardworking.
Yeah, I like that part too, because one of them would walk by the mill or the other would walk by the dairy, and you got a sense that they would just linger a little bit and talk. And that developed the whole relationship.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Their romance and their marriage, it flows like water off a duck's back, so to speak, and that it's just smooth and gentle and easy, and it rolls. Nothing is abrupt. You're not shaken. Even when things are dangerous in other stories like adventures, it's all fairly easy, but believable at the same time. They're all well written in that sense, that the stories flow. Anyway, they get together and they get married, but funnily enough, on his wedding day, he's trying to put on his suit, and his friend comes to get him his suit, and then something happens, and he gets flour all over it, and his friend says, "Hi, you're not called Dusty for nothing." And they go to their wedding like that, and they have a wedding, and the old vole is sort of their priest, and they have this nice wedding, and it's really all of the little details are there. The book describes the buttering of bread and the flowers on the dress, and how she goes to make her dress in the bushes or something, so nobody sees it, because nobody's supposed to see even the dress before the wedding day.
I love that she has the detail of how they keep the butter cool during the summer, because it would get so hot.
Mm-hmm.
They would wrap it in leaves
Right.
and hang it in the river to keep the butter cool.
Yeah.
Things like that. Like, to me,
Yeah.
that's gold. I love it.
I think this was the story where they build a raft and have their wedding party on a raft.
Yes.
And they're so carrying on that the raft moorings break and they float down the river. And at first they're worried, but then they realize nothing bad's happening. So let's just keep partying.
Carry on.
And they keep dancing.
Mhm.
And it's very late. It's a beautiful scene. Just imagine that happening for real.
Mhm.
And everybody's so easygoing, and the river's so lazy that you all just kind of keep partying on the raft and dancing and celebrating. And then it bumps up against the reeds eventually, and you moor it in. And
then dusk settles in, and everyone just walks home in the twilight.
yeah.
It's charming.
Yeah, it's very nice. It's wonderful. That's the summer story. Autumn story is little Primrose Woodmouse gets lost. She's a young girl. I think she's a young girl. She gets lost in the dark woods during the harvest season. And there's a search party that comes for her, and she experiences all these strange animals, and they eventually come and get her. That's Autumn story. It's harvest oriented. Winter story is where the mice hold a grand snowball in the ice hall after a massive blizzard. I don't think I've ever read that one. Anyway, the 4 adventure stories: The Secret Staircase, The High Hills, Sea Story, and Poppy's Babies. Poppy's Babies follows Summer Story. Poppy, Eyebright, and Dusty Dogwood get married, and then Poppy has babies, and it's his Rose, Buttercup, and Pipkin, and they move to a new home. But the Secret Staircase, it's set during midwinter, and Primrose and Wilfred discover a hidden part of the old oak palace. The High Hills, I just read that one to the kids the other night. It's set in autumn. Wilfred, a young mouse, and Mr. Apple go on an expedition to the mountains to bring blankets to the voles. People live out in the mountains, some mice or some voles. I don't even know what a vole is. I didn't look it up. The old vole, like, oh yes, the voles. Are they the priestly class? Are they mice? I have no idea.
I'm just thinking it's like a big mole. I'm like,
It's a
I
big
don't know.
mole. It's a mole that's grown old, and they just call it a vole.
I don't know.
I don't know either. It's really great story though, because Wilfred reads about this adventurer long ago. I think his name was Hogweed or something. And he was the adventurer way back, like the Grand Took from Lord of the Rings that went adventuring. He's the only one of the hobbits who went on an adventure, a dangerous thing to do.
He left the Shire.
He left the Shire. Wilfred, the young boy, reads this and he thinks, I'm going to do this too. I'm going to go find the gold. I read it to my children and they all laughed. But I remember as a child watching the movies Indiana Jones. I remember thinking there are archaeological artifacts and treasures in my backyard, and I'm going to go find them. But I need a satchel first,
Yeah.
and I need a whip, and I need a hat. I remember reading that. As a child, you read these books. Adults think, haha, it's funny. But children read this stuff and think, I'm going to go do this too.
Did you ever try to dig to China?
At the beach, yes.
I totally did as well.
Yes.
In the schoolyard.
In the schoolyard, yeah. And the principal comes out and there's a big hole.
What are you doing? Well, you told me that it's on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
I just have to dig there.
I'm going to go find it. The faith of a child, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Children believe things more strongly than anything. They'll read something. Anyway, Wilfred does this, and he goes on this adventure and drags Mr. Apple with him. It's pretty interesting. Wilfred has... In the story, Wilfred had packed everything needed for the journey, just like Dogweed, or whatever his name was, that great adventurer long ago. And they get into trouble. They get cold. They have to light a fire. They have to eat. They have to make a raft. They have to rappel down a mountain, sort of. And it just so happens that he brought everything needed for that. However, his adventurous spirit got them into that trouble in the first place. And I was telling my children, I know many people like that, especially can-do, self-sufficient country guys who they come prepared for every possible scenario. And sometimes they get themselves involved in those scenarios and then justify the fact that they spent all this money or whatever that, like, well, I had to get a new chainsaw because, there was a tree down 10 miles from me and I had to go cut it up. If a hurricane or a tornado or a flood or storm comes in and destroys a lot, it's almost a joy to have to survive for a bit with all of the equipment that you've purchased.
Yeah, or even it could be like a boy with a pocket knife and a flashlight.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he finds 1,000 uses
Really,
for either
though,
one of those things.
That's what it is. It really is just, we are 30, 40, and 50-year-old men, 60-year-old men who are 8-year-old boys with a flashlight and a pocket knife. and we saw an Indiana Jones movie. Or we read about Hordwood Dog Head guy, whatever his name was, the adventurer. You know what, though? This does harken back. These whole stories harken back to a time where life was simpler and we were closer to the earth. There are funny sayings that we have from long ago, like horsepower. Horsepower. We still measure cars in horsepower. We even measure excavators in horsepower. It has 400 horsepower, this huge excavator, 400 horsepower. What an ancient way of measuring things. It's like saying, oh, that's 50 cubits long. What's a cubit? From my elbow to my fingertips. What? We measure things in feet. This is why, by the way, I like the imperial measurement system rather than metric. The metric is logical and rational in a scientific laboratory sense. But the imperial is familiar and quotidian, if I may speak Latin. It's mundane, it's normal. I know what a foot is. I know what a cup is. A cup is about as much as I want to drink.
It's accessible to a housewife in a cottage.
It's accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
A pint, a quart, a gallon, these sorts of things and measurements. A yard is about a man's stride. That's what it is. A fully grown man, take a stride as you're walking heartily. That's a yard. And you can actually pace yourself in the military. If you go on long rucks, you're taught to measure your pace. And it's not very off from a yard. A mile is a good long walk. Even the temperature, 100 degrees Fahrenheit is hot. 0 degrees Fahrenheit is cold, really cold. 100 degrees Celsius, you're dead. 0 degrees Celsius, you're dead. Right? It doesn't make any sense.
I know, I've never understood Celsius.
Wait, what am I talking about here?
Yeah.
Right? But freezing temperature and hot temperatures in the Fahrenheit system, it makes sense. 100, really hot. 0, really cold. Celsius, 100, dead. 0, dead. It doesn't make sense. The imperial is familiar. These stories are familiar.
Well, another thing I like about the stories is the interactions between the adults and the children. There's not these great boundaries between them. They very much all speak together and interact, but there is still the respect. The adults are clearly the ones in the positions of authority and they command, but it's not a harsh commanding presence at all. There's an understanding with the children. And I think that the way that she puts all of that in her stories is a good example. It's a nice way to see adults and children interact. Whereas today, a lot of times there's a big divide.
Right.
Children don't know how to talk to adults. They don't know how to interact with them. They're seen as another species. And here they're all together.
I especially remember seeing this during the 90s and 80s movies. Anytime you watch a movie from the 80s or the 90s, they still do it today also, but it was really, really potent during that time where the children are complete strangers to the parents and vice versa. For instance, I think the last movie we watched, or at least that I watched, that I remember watching, was Christmas Vacation with Chevy Chase and whoever else. The children in that movie, from the very beginning, they're going to get the Christmas tree, and the children are sitting in the back and they're just completely checked out, have no intention or connection with the parents at all. Why are we doing this, Dad? Do we have to? I'm like, yes, darling, we're going to go do this. And the complete disconnect. The same thing in modern family shows. I don't even know what they're called. They're all the same, though, from the 90s to today, like Married with Children, all the way to Modern Family. The children and the parents' interaction is absolutely like aliens, literal aliens, different species interacting with each other. Whereas in this, everybody is together. They're all together, and it's natural and normal. I can tell you so many times when I was teaching, we often would stand out. Every school, or at least every school that I was a part of, does this. You stand outside of your classroom, or you stand outside as the carpool is happening, and you greet the children in the morning. The children, you can always tell who's being raised in the modern way and who's being raised in the old way. Because the old way, the children will look you in the eye and say good morning. They treat you like an adult. An eighth grader treats a teacher like normal, even though there's a little bit of deference there. It's normal. The ones who are raised in the modern sense, they don't look you in the eye. They kind of mumble. They act like they didn't hear you. They just keep walking. Like they have no interaction with anybody outside of their very, very specific peer group age grade thing. And they never have to interact with anybody outside of that, younger than them or older than them.
Mm-hmm.
They treat younger people as these little toys to pick on, and older people as this group to avoid. That's one reason why I didn't like a few books that we read before. I won't mention all of them, but in some of them, the children were like the Indian in the cupboard, for instance. That was one where Omri, the main character, the boy, his whole goal throughout the book was to avoid adults the entire time, to keep secrets from them, to avoid them, whether it was a teacher or a principal or his parent or his friend's parents, the whole time, avoid adults, don't talk to them, don't tell them, they don't understand us. We have to keep secrets from them. This is a completely different way. And, the reason I'm harping on this is because your child's ability, like even if you don't care about morality at all, if you're just some secular person, practical, whatever, your child's ability to interact with other human beings is directly correlated with their success in life.
It's make or break.
Their material, social success in life.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to interact with others in a social setting. You can't just isolate into your little peer group where you have no idea what other people are even saying because your language is different. I was joking with you earlier about how young people used to use the word yeet. I guess they still do, and I didn't know what it meant. And I would act like I didn't know, and I didn't really know what it meant. One tip, if you're a teacher listening to this, one key tip for you is if you try to be cool with the young, you will not be cool with them. But if you try to actually lean into the distance between you, you will actually find that it endears you to the children, to them. So if you purposefully misuse the word yeet, or purposefully mispronounce some pop singer's name, or some social media, like don't call TikTok, call it Tic Tac. And the kids will freak out and they will love you for it. They will love, but you got to act ignorant completely. Act like you know what you're talking about. Say, you kids, today you're all on Tic Tac and InstaFace. You guys need to just get off of that. And they're like, whoa, what, Mr. So it's you're like, what, guys? You know what I'm talking about? Faceborg. That you're on the social media book face, and they will think it's hilarious. But if you try to get in and go, yeah, so I went to the Taylor whatever concert last night, they're gonna think you're a loser. Don't try to get in with them. Mispronounce Taylor Swift, call her Taylor Slow or something, and they will love it. They will love it so much if you just lean into the distance. If you're 30 years old and you think that you're not old, they think that you are ancient.
True.
They think that you have survived the grave somehow. Okay? Lean into it. What we're talking about, the point you just made, was that there's a distance between the relations in this book. And yet everybody is connected. It all works together somehow because there is that distance. This is the lie of egalitarianism. I'm sorry to get into this stuff.
No, this sounds good.
Egalitarianism says that difference breeds division. And so for humanity to come together, we all have to be the same. Sameness, equality breeds familiarity, breeds likeness, and therefore unity and unification. If we're all made the same, then we'll all be together. Everyone throughout all of history, and history itself has proven this opposite. The church, by the way, Thomas Aquinas, Augustine, everybody has said God made all of creation diverse in order that it would fit together. Think of puzzle pieces. They're all different and they fit together. But here's the thing. One piece only fits with the ones around it. Not every piece fits together with every other piece equally, but they do fit together. If everybody's equal, we're all like BBs. You dump them out of a bottle and they scatter. The only way they're held together is if you all force them together through some container. Lack of freedom, right? But if we're different, adults and children, we fit together. Parents and children, husband and wife, man and wife fit together because we're different. And it's the same way with social relations. There's the old vole, there's the Lord Woodmouse and Lady Woodmouse. There are the adults, there are the children in this story. And because of that difference, because they lean into the difference, therefore, they actually fit together. It actually works.
I think it has to be a difference within a cohesion, though, because they are, if you look at them as a group, they're all the same.
Yeah.
They're all mice. And it's within their mouseness that you can see the differences and appreciate them.
The stories have a realism to them because there's so much detail. For instance, there are recipes from Brambly Hedge, and they follow the seasons. And Barklam, the author, actually tested many of these herself to see whether people were using them in the real world with real world ingredients.
Wait, for real? Is there like a book of Brambly Hedge recipes?
They're in the books. There's not a book separate about them, but they're in the books. Here are some of the recipes. Watercress soup. And I looked up what a watercress is. Literally, here's what the dictionary said. It's a cress that grows in water. I felt like the dictionary slapped me in the face. I was like, thanks.
Oh, well,
you idiots.
Ask a stupid question. Yeah.
In the words of the young, I got yeeted. I don't even know what yeeted means. I felt like whatever it means, I got it. There's watercress soup, which you eat in the spring, apparently. There's nettle soup. What's that?
It's seasonal. Everything that they eat and have is seasonal. So that's when it grows.
There's nettle soup, wild garlic and cheese scones, honey creams. This is summer now. Elderflower cordial, syllabub with blood orange. There's blackberry and almond tart, hawberry jelly. Now we're in autumn. Apple and caraway cake, chestnut soup, hazelnut cake, chocolate and ginger truffle torte, winter. There's also violet preserves. So they have all kinds of fairy-airy things that they do.
There's some woods on the side of our house. And every year, right about this time of year,
yes,
we go and we pick all the violets that grow there. And we often make jelly from them.
You do make jelly.
We do.
Yeah. So we're living this sort of life. It's funny. I mentioned this earlier. You read these books, and for you and I as adults, we're like, haha, nice children's story. Our children read them and go out and do it.
Pick the violets.
They come in all the time with wild field flowers, eating them. They're eating them. My son brought me 3 or 4 of them and said, here you go. I'm like, thanks.
Look, I will say in my defense, I've told them which ones. We identify them and I say, these are the ones you can eat. And they know now. They're like, oh, these are the ones that have the drop of nectar in them. So they don't eat just anything.
Yeah. Most of the time.
I think.
At least in front of us.
I do love the food in these stories, those food details. And I think that's so very English also.
Very English.
The emphasis on the food and the preparation.
The whole story will stop to talk about the food. This is what gets me, by the way, in the chase scene, Chronicles of Narnia, the witch is coming. This is the second one, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The witch is coming to get them. They just figured it out. And Mrs. Beaver, Mr. Beaver, and the 3 kids, because Edmund's gone, they have to run away. Right now, she's already left, if we've calculated the time correctly. She'll be here in a few minutes. And then the scene just stops, just dead stop. And Mrs. Beaver has to pack. She has to pack. And she packs the cast iron pots and the sewing machine and the pillows and
The bread knife.
the bread knife and the cutting board. And we have to get this and this, and everybody has to have a pack and a satchel and wool, and it just stops. And it's all about food at that point. And they describe food. Every time Lewis has the ability to stop and describe food, he does. And it's butter and toast and jam. And Tolkien does this too. Whenever the dwarfs come over in The Hobbit, they come over to Bilbo's house. Butter and jam and bacon and bread and eggs and tea and coffee.
Yeah, it's all
and
very tea and crumpets. It's
cream. Yes. Over and over and over. And then they sing a song about it. Smash the plates. That's what Bilbo Baggin hates. Yeah, they keep singing this. Yeah, at the wedding, we mentioned the wedding earlier where Dusty Dogwood and Poppy Eyebright, they mention everything is mentioned and everybody who made it. They have cold nettle soup, watercress sandwiches, honey and cream cakes, candied violets, elderflower sorbet, syllabub, mead, berry cordials, over and over and over. All of the little details. That's what makes the book endearing, though. You
Mhm.
feel like you're in an old world where details like that matter.
And they're all in the pictures too. You see all of
Mhm.
these things being prepared. And I've got to just say about the pictures in this story, you've already mentioned how well they're done. But to me, the pictures are half of the story.
Yes.
They fill in. They provide so much background and texture to the story.
Yeah.
So much detail. You can look at the picture and it's almost like it fills in the blanks for you.
Yes.
You're seeing so much more of the story. They almost tell their own story. And you're
Yes.
understanding how the mice live, how this could be an actual realistic thing that they're doing here. The pictures make it work.
A very purposeful level of detail. So Barklam actually painted these or drew them as well. There's a cutaway technique. There's several things here. Basically, it's architectural cross sections. So instead of just showing the outside of a tree and saying, "Oh, they live in there," the bark is peeled away and you can see inside, and there's this complexity. There's multiple floors, spiral staircases. There's kitchens with tiny hanging copper pans everywhere. The pantry's filled with jars that are labeled. All of the preserves are labeled. So there's a realism. I mentioned this earlier that everything is logically placed. So the kitchens are near the base for access to water and storing cool things. The bedrooms are tucked away higher for warmth and safety. Dusty Dogwood's store stump mill thing, you can just sit there and look at it for a long time.
And
for
it was on the
5 or 10
river,
minutes.
as mills are.
Yeah. I mentioned this earlier too, that Barklam spent 5 years researching before she published her first book. There's also botanical precision. The plants, the berries, the flowers, they're not generic.
Mhm.
They're not random. They're botanically accurate, actually.
Right. The elderberry cordial occurs in the summertime.
Yeah. Yeah. You can identify specific species of moss in her books. You can identify types of lichen on the bark. There's different types. And the exact variety of blackberry or rosehip. It's this type of black. And that shows that these people have been settled here a long time. We have a painting of Rome in our bathroom. And I remember getting it painted. I went to Rome and I spent some time there. And I remember being on the side street here and watching the artist girl paint it with watercolor. She did it in 5 minutes, just boom, boom, boom. It's a certain bridge across the Tiber, and then there's Rome in the background. And the painting is very generic. It's lacking detail. And I was only in Rome a few times and just a few days each time. And I was thinking about how people who go take a trip to Europe, they go there for a week or 2 weeks, maybe a long trip, 2 weeks. But that's really not a long time. You just fly into these cities real quick and run through them. You don't notice all of the detail of someone who has been there all his life and all his grandfather's life and great grandfather and so on, all the way back for many years. When you're in a place for a long time, you begin to notice the different types of lichen. You begin to notice the different types of blackberry. The ones, like, for instance, if you don't know, The early jalapenos, if you grow jalapenos, they're not hot. The ones that grow later in the summer, they're hotter. The wines that grow in southern Italy taste different than the wines that grow in northern Italy. It doesn't matter what variety or whatever, it's just the climate. And you can actually tour Italy, or I'm assuming France, but I didn't live in France. You can tour Italy and go taste the different wines. Or if you live in Italy and you're shopping in, because sometimes the wines will be from all over in the same store, you can just you can pick the wine flavor by where it's from. And I'm not a I'm not a sommelier or somebody who can taste it blindfolded, but I know enough about it to know what time of year was it grown, when was it harvested, and what region of Italy is it from, and I know what wine I like by that. And it was only because I was there for a while. That's it. Or the pizza in the South, the pizza in the North. It's different. But you only know that if you've been there for a while. If you go there, you fly into Venice real quick, you run around, you don't know. You don't know what you like. The restaurants on the northeastern side are different from the restaurants on the southwestern side, etc. The details like that where she distinguishes the details in the story where Barklam distinguishes between this and that in fine detail shows that this is a settled people, a settled way of life, a rooted, grounded people. They eat from the land. The strength of the hills is theirs, inside of them.
Yeah, you also catch an element of that in the sea story. And what happens there is the wood community, they run out of salt and they have to get on a ship and sail up the river all the way to the seashore, and they meet other mice who have since moved there.
Mm-hmm.
But they talk about how their great grandfathers or ancestors were originally from this same riverside community, but that they had sort of migrated their way to the seashore and just never returned. So there is still this connection to them. But there's also the sense of fatherhood, of ancestry, of we've been here a long time, and this is how we do things. And so the children from this riverside woodland community come to the seashore part, and they're like, what is this food that they're eating? Like, even there, the food is different. So Barklam has them eating certain things, in all of these other stories, but in that one, even the food that the mice eat changes based on the location. They're eating a totally different cuisine there.
You really feel like you're getting a tour of a real world.
Yeah.
When you read these books. We were talking about art, though. Even the color palette changes with the seasons. So in the spring, there are pale greens, there's primrose yellow, there's soft sky blues. In the summer, things have a golden light. There's sort of vibrant floral pinks and deep river greens and things like that. In the autumn, there's russets and brown, burnt orange, dusty reflections from the harvest. And in the winter, clearly there's stark skies and icy blues. There's 4 seasons. I mentioned cottagecore earlier. Some people have said, one reviewer has said that Jill Barklam has actually influenced what became the cottagecore. I don't know the history behind all of this. I don't know of anything before her that actually was like this, though. There are some drawings and some books, for instance, that are from yesteryear that I remember kind of being like this, but hers might have been one of the first, I'm not sure, to draw like this. And her ability to make small, cluttered space look cozy rather than messy. That's something that I think people should strive for as we gain more and more possessions in the age of mass production. We tend towards mess or simplicity of owning nothing and being free.
Minimalism.
Minimalism. Whereas in this world, it was preserving everything. There was a preservation, a conservation principle in these people. Nothing was to be thrown away because it was bent or broken, but to be repaired.
Yeah, like all of these things that filled their homes weren't meaningless knickknacks. They were useful, like you've mentioned, things that they had preserved to use again.
There was no plastic.
Right.
Have you ever seen simple pictures of kitchens on Instagram or Pinterest or something? and it's beautiful and you don't know why. Maybe it's the color pattern or whatever. It's because there's no plastic.
Mm-hmm.
Or a simple picture of an English countryside. And you think, wow, this is just what? Like, stop though. Why? There are no street signs, no billboards, no power lines. That's why.
Yeah, I had this realization the last time we watched Pride and Prejudice. I had that thought that came over me. I was looking around their home, and it was as one of the housekeeper was carrying out a basket of laundry.
Mm-hmm.
I saw her laundry basket, and I went,
Yeah.
it's not this hideous plastic
Right.
tub thing.
Right.
That's beautiful. Laundry became beautiful.
Right. Everything. If you're very purposeful about it, the way we built this house, there's almost no plastic anywhere. It's real brick. It's real wood, glass, stone, everywhere. And it looks wonderful. I've seen other people build this exact same house because I know the architect. I looked at his other examples. It doesn't have to look like this.
Yeah.
In the interior, the doors, the wood glass doors, it can look different. The point is, Jill Barklam drew this big, beautiful picture of English country life before the Industrial Revolution dumped on us a bunch of cheap plastic, synthetic polyester goods that we throw away because they're cheap. Life in the modern world becomes getting rid of as much junk or piling it up. The poor people, you can tell people are poor because they have a bunch of stuff that they can't get rid of.
Right.
Their front yard, their backyard is just filled with piles of stuff, junk, and they can't get rid of it. Motorcycles, cars, 3 or 4 trailers all put in different positions, 4 or 5 sheds,
Things no longer even
lawnmowers,
identifiable.
yeah, trampolines that are broken, and they can't get rid of them. Wealthy people, it's all manicured and pure, and there's nothing. It looks like nobody lives there. A minimalist lifestyle. 1.2 children, 5 dogs that somebody else walks, But my point is, however, in this world, there's lots of stuff. However, it's all put in order and cared for. Each thing is loved.
Yeah.
Each thing is loved. The blackberry jelly from last year's summer harvest or whatever, I don't even know when you heard. It's labeled and made with love. And it's in a jar on a shelf, and it's drawn particularly. That world is a world that I think people would like to at least visit, if not live in. People look at that sort of thing and go, I'd like to be there and rest. I can't live there, though, for some reason. I'd have to work in the city, perhaps, or whatever. I live in modernity, but I'd like to be there. And it's a world also that's particular to a certain people. You don't see that, for instance, in Africa. You don't see it in India. You don't see it, I don't think, anywhere in South America, in at least native cultures there. You hardly see it here in America anymore. But there are some places where it exists. I think the Old South was one.
Yeah, I was thinking there was a little bit of overlap. I was trying to think of other stories that had this sort of aesthetic to them. And my initial thought was the Little House books. But then I realized, no, actually, there's not the history there.
Yeah.
They were pioneers.
Right.
They didn't have homes full of things that went back generations.
Right.
And so, yeah, you mentioned Civil War or the South, and the antebellum South. That's a good one. But also, I think maybe the New England area, for instance, the Little Women setting.
Yeah.
I think you get a more similar picture of coziness, of the hearth, of the home being the center, of everything there being an intentional, purposeful, and something that we're connected to.
There's a social world. It's actually very accurate to the English village, pre-industrial English village, 1700s, 1800s. There's the rhythms, the hierarchies, the technology. They have a manorial structure, social structure, and how they order themselves. There's a gentry. There are trades, and each person doesn't just do that. That's who he is. Dusty Dogwood
who his father was. I think it's probably because it's who his father was also.
Yeah, Dusty Dogwood is the miller. Poppy Eyebright runs the dairy. Mr. Apple is the storekeeper. And that's who they are too. There's a sense in which your trade is your status, and you have a respect for that. People look at you in this way. There's a self-sufficiency about them. They run everything except for a few externalities, which you mentioned: milk, salt. It mirrors a world that's bygone, where there's inequality and yet community. There's a delicate balance for that to arise, and easily smashed. And we have clearly smashed it at this point. And when you see it, you like it, but you don't want to admit it openly because you're not supposed to. We're supposed to be all equal today. There's an agricultural calendar. They live by the weather. Today, we don't. I look at the weather on my phone app, and it doesn't matter. I can be inside all day, get in my car, go to the next building. They live by the weather. They have harvest seasons. They have seasonal celebrations. They have a midwinter ritual. They have a midsummer ritual. Even that wedding, it was sort of midsummer-esque. The midwinter ritual is the snowball, and they light the Yule log, and it kind of nods to pagan and early Christian traditions. When Christianity came in, it wasn't one fell swoop, but they kind of adopted some of those pagan things and moved on with them.
Yeah, at the wedding, they have the ceremony, and the old Vole gives he gives a
Yeah.
talk, and
Yeah.
there's this moment where he says some verses,
Yeah,
and it's like, was that a prayer? What was that? I
right,
mean, it's very sweet, but it's pagan,
right.
but at the same time,
By the lilies and the sun and the stars and the water.
but it's officiating a wedding,
Yeah,
which is more Christian in nature, and so it's
Right,
just it is
right.
neat how she blends it.
yeah. The domestic industry and still room knowledge is what it's called. Still room. It's part of a grand English house with herbs, and there's preserves and medicines, and spirits are distilled in this still room. So, for instance, there's foraging. The mice don't shop; they forage. They go and find things, and their diet is of nettle soup and sloe gin and elderberry wine. And this is traditional British hedgerow cooking. Before the industrialization of food, you would eat what's around you. You would eat off the land. We have a book about fishing. It's huge. It's 2 inches thick, and it's basically a way of life where there's a lot of water where we live. It's not just, oh, that's nice. The land and the seasons, you are kind of one with them in a strange way. Even the clothing that they wear, the mice wear waistcoats and bonnets, shawls, and the patterns are floral, checkered, or they have natural dyes. Everything's just as it should be. It's a cottage industry of spinning, weaving, that used to be the backbone of rural English economies. So there's sort of this lost England sentiment. There can be a deep nostalgia for a world that we don't even know that used to exist, but we kind of feel it. There's a book here, a history book that I have called There's a history book that I have called Rural Life in Victorian England by G.E. Mingay, Mingay, and it's about people's lives long ago. I'm sure this might have been a sort of book that Barklam read. It has a lot of pictures. It's a really nice book. Some of the chapters are called The Landowners, The Farmers, The Farm Workers, Industrial Workers in the Countryside, Tradesmen and Craftsmen, The End of the Old Order. And it was published in 1976. So during the mid 1900s, this was when people began to look back. Even in America, a lot of those cowboy Western movies, it was a time of looking back to a previous pre-industrialization of America where industrialism was happening in the 1800s, but it hadn't completely taken over everything. But by the 1950s, it's over. It's gone. That world is gone. And people begin to look back and write stories, histories about this old time. For instance, there's other English books, like that one about animals, The Vet. It's called All Creatures Great and Small by James Herriot. Beautiful book. It's a set of stories. This veterinarian who was a vet in the countryside in England, And it was his stories going around the farms and helping farmers with their animals, horses, cows, whatever. It's so quaint and wonderful and peaceful and simple. It makes you think, I would love to be a veterinarian and just live out in the country and help people with their animals, because it's a slow life. It's an easy life. Everybody knows each other. It's just idyllic and wonderful. And it's pre-industrialization.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier that they all dealt with each other and interacted with each other. There was no oversight, no government to be
Yes.
arbitrating between them.
Right.
And to me, that's one of the sweetest things about this, is that there aren't all of these regulations. They can share food from their kitchens, or they could, I'm sure, sell something to the cows, and there's no one telling them, no, you need a permit, or was your kitchen certified?
Yeah.
There's nothing like that they have to encounter.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a
That's
friend,
lovely.
we have a friend who started baking and making all kinds of goods, and she became successful in her town at doing it. And she wanted to make a business of it, but she had to get her kitchen certified. Fortunately, she wrote something and got a grant of some money to build a kitchen in her basement that was certified to be able to do that. And it just seems ridiculous. But in the world of mass production, I remember hearing someone talk about this with milk, for instance, raw milk. You can't even buy raw milk anymore.
Mm-hmm.
How crazy is that? It's illegal to drink milk from the cow. That's crazy. Well, if you think about what's happening, though, we have 8 billion people on planet Earth. I don't know how many of them drink milk, but 350 million people in America are drinking milk. That's a lot of milk, okay? Every day. How do you produce that much milk? Well, you have to shove a bunch of cows together. And you need to pump out tens of thousands of gallons of milk a day. Well, when you do that, and it's that much, and it's that mass production, you're going to have cows with diseases, with all kinds of problems that a veterinarian, this small scale, can't just come around and fix. So the way you fix it is you just boil this stuff and kill all the bad and standardize it real quick.
Yeah, I think it also, though, has to do with the fact that we are so spread out and that we go to a grocery store for our milk.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think back to former times, the milkman would go door to door
Right.
and deliver the milk.
Yeah.
That is because they lived together. They were close.
Right.
We knew each other. He would bring it to you because you needed the milk. And this was a daily thing because that's how milk works.
Yeah.
And so when you have, like you said, a big mass of cows and having it all produced, it needs to have a long shelf life. And I think that's a big motivator also, because it's going to last a lot longer once it's been boiled and pasteurized than anybody from anywhere can go to the store and pick it up and they don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
So raw milk, yes, is inconvenient, but when you live together and when it's local, like we recently started doing that. We recently started buying local raw milk. And it's really helped me understand how and why it was the way it was, why a milkman would deliver every day.
Yeah.
The way things worked, it just becomes more clear when you start doing it yourself.
Mm-hmm. We buy eggs locally.
Mm-hmm.
We buy our meat locally. There's so much more we can continue talking about, because these stories reflect a broader world that is desirable. So it's not just a bunch of mice doing silly things. You read the book and you feel like your soul got a massage. The story was simple, and I don't really have a desire to read them again and again. They're not great, profound stories. But it's just a simple, beautiful time. And it really makes you kind of sad that we've lost that, and we try to go back and gain it in some way. And to the degree to which you can do that, you feel like you've achieved something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pleasant. And in the modern industrial world, if you can live a simple life, it really is a privilege.
With these books, it's not the individual stories that are enchanting. It's the world that she has created, or rather recreated for us.
Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this content, please consider supporting the show by subscribing at arslibri.substack.com. Your support enables me to produce this content, Subscribers also get bonus episodes, detailed book lists, and more.